Chapter 3 Financial IQ Number 1, Making More Money After 4 Years at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York. I graduated in 1969 and got my first job with Standard Oil of California sailing on their oil tankers. I was a third mate sailing between California, Hawaii, Alaska, and Tahiti. It was a great job with a great company. I only worked for 7 months and then had 5 months off, got to see the world, and the pay was pretty good at approximately $47,000 a year. That's the equivalent of $140,000 today. A salary of $47,000 was considered a lot of money for a kid right out of college in 1969. It still is. Yet when compared to some of my classmates, my pay was low. Some of my classmates were starting their careers at $70,000 to $150,000 a year as third mates. Today that would be the equivalent of $250,000 to $500,000 a year as starting pay. Not bad for 22-year-olds fresh out of school. The reason my pay was lower was because Standard Oil was a non-union shipping company. My classmates in the higher pay scales were working for union wages. After only 4 months as a third mate, I resigned from my high-paying job with Standard Oil and joined the Marine Corps to fight in the Vietnam War. I felt an obligation to serve my country. At the time, many of my friends were doing everything they could to avoid the draft. Many were going on to graduate school. One ran and hid in Canada. Others were coming up with strange diseases and hoping to be classified for if medically unable to be drafted. I was draft exempt because I was in a non-defense vital industry classification. Because oil is essential for war, and I worked for an oil company, the draft board couldn't get its hands on me. I didn't have to avoid the war as my friends were doing. Many friends were surprised when I volunteered to go and fight. I didn't have to. I wanted to. For me, going to war and fighting was not the hardest part of my decision. I had already been to Vietnam in 1966 as a student studying cargo operations in Cam Ranh Bay. From my naive vantage point, the war actually seemed kind of exciting. I was not concerned about fighting, killing, and possibly being killed. The toughest part of my decision was the pay cut I would have to take. Marine Corps second lieutenants were being paid $2,400 a year. At Standard Oil, I was making that in 2 weeks. On top of that, when you factor in that I was working only 7 months a year with 5 months vacation, I was giving up a lot. I was earning nearly $7,000 a month for 7 months and then taking a 5-month vacation without pay and without the fear of being fired for not working. Not a bad deal. There are many people who would take the deal today. Being a great patriotic company, Standard Oil was very understanding when I informed them that I was leaving to serve my country. They said I could have my job back, if I came back alive. My time in the service would also count towards seniority with the company. To this day, I recall walking out of their San Francisco office on Market Street with this horrible feeling in my stomach. I kept asking myself, what are you doing? Are you nuts? You don't have to go. You don't have to fight. You're draft exempt. After 4 years of school, you're finally making a lot of money. With the thought of going from earning $4,000 a month to $200 a month rattling in my head, I nearly turned around to ask for my job back. Taking one last look at the Standard Oil building, I drove to Ghirardelli Square to spend money like a rich man at my favorite bar, the Buena Vista. Realizing that I would now be earning $200 a month as a Marine, I knew this might be my last chance to feel rich and spend rich. I had a lot of cash in my pocket, and I wanted to enjoy it. The first thing I did was buy the bar a round of drinks. This got the party going. Soon I met a beautiful young woman who was attracted to the cash flowing from my wallet. We left the bar. We wined and dined. We laughed and howled. In my mind, it really was eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow I might die. At the end of the evening, the lovely young lady shook my hand, kissed me on the cheek, and sped off in a cab. I wanted more, but she just wanted my money. The next morning, I began my drive from San Francisco to Pensacola, where my flight training was about to begin, and in October of 1969 I reported to flight school. 2 weeks later, I nearly died when I saw what a $200 a month paycheck looked like, after taxes. 5 years later, with 1 year spent in Vietnam, I was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps. My first and immediate challenge was financial IQ number 1, making more money. I was 27 years old and had 2 great professions to fall back on, one as a ship's officer, the second as a pilot. For a while, I considered returning to Standard Oil and asking for my job back. I liked Standard Oil, and I liked San Francisco. I also liked the pay. I would have started at about $60,000 a year, since Standard Oil counted my time in the Marine Corps towards seniority. My second option was to get a job as a pilot with the airlines. Most of my fellow Marine pilots were being offered great jobs with a pretty good starting pay of about $32,000 a year. Although the pay was not as good as Standard Oil, being an airline pilot appealed to me. On top of that, whatever the airlines would pay me had to be better than the $985 a month the Marine Corps was paying me to be a pilot after 5 years of service. Instead of returning to Standard Oil or flying for the airlines, however, I took a job with the Xerox Corporation in downtown Honolulu. My starting pay was $720 a month. Once again, I took a pay cut. My friends and family thought the war had made me crazy. Now, you may ask why I would take a job paying only $720 a month in a very expensive city like Honolulu. The answer is found in the theme of this book, Increasing Financial IQ. I took the job with Xerox not for the pay, but to increase my financial intelligence, especially financial intelligence number 1, making more money. I decided that the best way for me to earn money was as an entrepreneur, not an airline pilot or ship's officer. I knew that if I were to become an entrepreneur, I needed sales skills. There was only one problem: I was terribly shy and dreaded rejection. My problems were shyness and a lack of sales skills. Xerox was offering professional sales training. They had the problem of needing salespeople. I was looking to become a salesperson. So it was a great deal. We both solved each other's problems. Soon after I was hired, the company flew me to their corporate training headquarters in Leesburg, Virginia. My sales training officially began. The 4 years I spent working for Xerox, from 1974 to 1978, were very hard. For the first 2 years I was almost fired a number of times because I couldn't sell. Not only was I not selling and in danger of losing my job, but I was also not making any money. But I had a goal to become the top salesman in the Honolulu branch, and I faced my challenges with determination. After the first 2 years, the sales training and on-the-street experience began to pay off, and I finally reached my goal of becoming number 1 in sales at the Honolulu branch. I had solved the problem of being shy and hating rejection, and had learned to sell. Even better, I was making a lot more money than I would have as a ship's officer or an airline pilot. If I had just settled into a job after the war, I would never have overcome my fear of rejection and my shyness, and I would never have reaped the rewards of facing those challenges and conquering them. I learned a valuable lesson from my experience at Xerox: solving the problem was the path to wealth. Once I reached my goal and became number 1 in sales, I resigned to take on my next challenge, building a business. Anyone who has built his or her own business knows the first problem is, Once again, financial IQ number 1, making more money. Since I now had absolutely no money coming in, I had to solve financial IQ number 1 quickly. Before You Quit Your Job, in my previous book, Before You Quit Your Job, I wrote about the process of building my first major business, a business that brought to market the first nylon and Velcro surfer wallets. In that book I wrote about the 8 components that make up any business, and about how not having all 8 of those business components is the reason why so many businesses fail and remain unprofitable. I believe it's a very important book for anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur and start their own business. It is important to read that book before you quit your job. In the book, I wrote about how my business went to extreme success in about a year, making me a millionaire, and then failed suddenly. I described the feelings of depression and loss, and a strong desire to run away and hide after the business collapsed. I was deeply in debt and facing the biggest financial problem of my life up to that point. Rich Dad, however, encouraged me to face my problems and rebuild the business instead of run and declare bankruptcy. He reminded me that solving this messy problem would increase my financial intelligence. It was some of the best advice I've ever received. Although painful, the process of facing my problem and rebuilding the business was the best education I could have asked for. It took a number of years to solve the problem and rebuild the business, but the process increased my financial IQs number 1 through 5 and made me a financially smarter entrepreneur. Rebuilding the wreckage of my business was my business school. The first thing I had to do was put together the 8 parts of my business, the BI triangle. The second thing I had to do was redefine my business by finding a competitive niche. You see, by 1981, the year I was rebuilding the business, the market was inundated by other wallet makers. Nylon wallets from countries such as Korea, Taiwan, and Indonesia were flooding the world market. Prices for wallets dropped from $10 at retail, the price I had established, to $1 a wallet on the streets of Waikiki and the world. Nylon wallets had become a commodity, and as you know, the market for commodities goes to the lowest priced producer. In order to compete as a commodity, I needed a market niche. I needed to become a brand. That opportunity came in the form of rock and roll. As described in Before You Quit Your Job, I stumbled into the rock and roll business, and saved my business by licensing the rights to use rock band names on my wallets. Soon I was producing wallets for Van Halen, Judas Priest, Duran Duran, Iron Maiden, Boy George, and others. Because I was a legally licensed product, I got my retail price back up to $10 a wallet. Although I now had to pay a royalty to the bands, being a legally licensed rock and roll product opened doors to retailers across America and throughout the world. My business boomed and money came pouring back in. As I've said, the way to increase one's financial intelligence is by solving the problem in front of you. By 1981, I had solved the problem of rebuilding my business. Then the next problem appeared, beating my low-priced competitors, and the imitators who took my product and were making money while I was losing money. This problem came in the form of pirates. The very people who copied my first product, the original nylon wallet, were now copying my competitive niche. They started producing the same licensed products I was producing, selling at lower prices, only not paying a royalty to the bands. After a few months of fighting the pirates, I realized the only people getting rich were my attorneys who were charging me to fight them in court but not winning. The pirates were smarter and quicker than my attorneys. All my attorneys could tell me was that they needed more money to fight. It didn't take me long to realize I was just paying another group of pirates, and these pirates were supposed to be on my side. I was learning another valuable lesson in business and money, which will be covered in the next chapter, Financial IQ number 2, Protecting Your Money. There is a saying that goes, if you can't beat them, join them. Tired of hemorrhaging money in a losing battle, I fired my attorneys and flew to Korea, Taiwan, and Indonesia to join forces with the pirates. Instead of fighting them in court, which was costing me much more money than I was making, I licensed my competitors to produce my wallets for me. My production costs dropped, my legal fees went down, and I had better factories behind me. I could now do what I did best, sell. Business boomed again. Soon our products were in department stores and at rock concerts. In 1982, a new television network hit the airwaves, MTV. Our business went through the roof and, once again, money poured in. In January of 1984, I sold my share of the rock and roll nylon wallet business to my two partners. Kim and I left Hawaii and moved to California to start our business education company. I had no idea there would be such a difference between selling a product and selling education. 1985 was the worst year of our lives. Our savings ran out, and soon the problem of not enough money was a major one. I'd been broke before, but Kim hadn't. That she stayed with me is a testament to her character, not my good looks. Yet, we worked together and built an international business teaching entrepreneurship and investing with offices in the U.S., Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Canada. In 1994, Kim and I sold the business and retired with enough passive income from our real estate investments to support us for the rest of our lives. But we got bored. After our brief retirement, Kim and I produced our board game Cash Flow in 1996, and Rich Dad Poor Dad was released as a self-published book in 1997. In mid-2000, Oprah Winfrey had me on her program for an hour, and the rest is history. Today, the Rich Dad Company is an international business. Much of the success is due to lessons learned from the failures and successes of my previous businesses. If I hadn't learned from solving my problems, I would never have made it this far. If I had thrown in the towel and let circumstances overwhelm me, you wouldn't be reading this book right now. Every goal has a process, as we all know. Every worthwhile goal has a process and takes work. For example, to become a medical doctor there is a rigorous process of education and training. Many people dream of becoming a doctor, but the process gets in their way. In the last few pages you just read about my process, and let me tell you, it was work. One of the reasons people lack financial IQ, number 1, making more money, is because they want the money but not the process. What many people do not realize is that it's the process that makes them rich, not the money. One of the reasons many lottery winners or kids who inherit family wealth are soon broke is because they received the money, but didn't have to go through the process. Many other people fail to become rich because they value a steady paycheck more than the learning process of becoming financially smarter and richer. They are held back by the fear of being poor. It is this very fear that keeps them from taking the chances and solving the problems required to become rich. We are all different, and have different strengths and weaknesses. We all have different processes, different challenges, and different problems. Some people are natural salespeople. I wasn't. My first problem was my inability to overcome my fear of selling and the terror of being rejected. Some people are natural-born entrepreneurs. I wasn't. I had to learn to be an entrepreneur. I make this point because I'm not saying you need to learn to sell, or that you need to learn to be an entrepreneur. That was my process. It may not be yours. The first step to increasing your financial IQ, number 1, making more money, is to decide what the best way for you to make more money is. If it's to become a medical doctor, get ready for medical school. If it's to become a pro golfer, start putting. In other words, choose your goal, and then choose your process. Always remember that the process is more important than the goal. Emotional intelligence. At this point, it is important to point out that financial intelligence is also emotional intelligence. Warren Buffett, the world's richest investor, says, "If you cannot control your emotions, you cannot control your money." The same is true for your process. One of the toughest parts of my process was not quitting when I was depressed, not losing my temper when I was frustrated, and to continue to study when I wanted to run. Another reason many people fail in their process is they cannot live without instant gratification. The main reason I mentioned the low pay I received at the start of my life was to illustrate the importance of delayed gratification. Many will sacrifice a richer tomorrow for a few bucks today. I did not make much money in my 20s and 30s, but I make millions today. Controlling the highs and lows of my emotions, and delaying short-term gratification, was essential in developing my financial intelligence. In other words, emotional intelligence is essential to financial intelligence. In fact, I would say that when it comes to money, emotional intelligence is the most important intelligence of all. It is more important than academic or professional intelligence. For example, many people fail to chase after their dreams because of fear. If they start, they quit when they fail, and then they blame others when they should be taking responsibility for their failures. Quitters rarely win. There is a young man who worked for me a few years ago. He was very bright, charming, had his MBA, and earned a lot of money. In his spare time, he and his wife tried many business ventures. They tried real estate, and failed. They bought a small franchise, and failed. Then they bought a nursing home, and nearly lost everything when patients died unexpectedly. Today, both are back at work with high-paying jobs, but an unsettling feeling of inadequacy. The reason I mention this young couple is because they failed to learn. They let the learning process beat them. When the going got tough, they quit. While it's commendable that they tried new ventures, they stopped when their problems seemed too big to be solved. They failed to push through their failure and learn from their mistakes. They failed to realize that the process, not the money, made them rich. One of the toughest lessons I had to learn from my rich dad was to stick with the process until I won. When I ran into trouble at Xerox because I could not sell, I wanted to quit. Because I could not sell, I was not making money. In fact, it was costing me more to live in Honolulu than I was earning. Rich Dad said, "You can quit when you win, but never quit because you're losing." Not until 1978, after becoming the #1 salesperson for Xerox, did I quit. The process had made me richer, both mentally and financially. By overcoming my problem of not being able to sell, I was able to overcome my problem of not making money. While working at Xerox, I started my nylon wallet business in my spare time. In 1978, I went full-time into my wallet business. The business took off, and then failed. Again, I wanted to quit. And again, Rich Dad reminded me that the process is more important than the goal. Many times he reminded me, while I was deeply in debt, without much money, that if and when I solved this problem, I would never need money again. I would know how to build a business, and I would be a little more financially intelligent. But first I had to solve the problem in front of me. Too much money. At the start of this book, I wrote that there are two kinds of money problems. One problem is not enough money, and the other is too much money. In 1974, as I was leaving the Marine Corps, I had to make up my mind which problem I wanted. If I wanted the problem of not enough money, I would take either the job with Standard Oil or the airlines. If I wanted the problem of too much money, I would take the job with Xerox, even if it paid the least. As you know, I took the problem of too much money. I wanted an education, not just money. I chose Xerox because I knew I could be a ship's officer, And I knew I could be a pilot. I didn't know if I could be an entrepreneur. I knew I could fail. I also knew I would learn the most if I faced the risk of failing. If I let fear of failure, of being poor, win, I wouldn't ever have gotten off the ground. One of the reasons people do not increase financial IQ number 1 is because they stick with what they know. Instead of taking on a new challenge and learning, they play it safe. Now, this doesn't mean you should do stupid and risky things. There are many things we could do but choose not to. For example, I could have chosen to climb Mount Everest. Or I could have signed up for NASA's astronaut program. Or I could have entered politics and run for public office. My point is that I chose my next challenge carefully, not haphazardly. I asked myself, what will my life be like if I take on this challenge and succeed? It's the same question I ask you to ask yourself. Helen Keller, the subject of the great movie The Miracle Worker, once said, "Life is a daring adventure. Or nothing." I agree. In my opinion, one way to increase your financial intelligence number 1 is to look at life as a learning adventure. For too many people, life is about playing it safe, doing the right things, and choosing job security over life. Your life does not have to be risky or dangerous. Life is about learning, and learning is about adventure. That is why I didn't go back to sailing ships or flying planes, even though I loved both professions. It was time for a new adventure. Intelligence is not about memorizing old answers and avoiding mistakes. Behavior our school system defines as intelligent. True intelligence is about learning to solve problems in order to qualify to solve bigger problems. True intelligence is about the joy of learning rather than the fear of failing. Making more money. Putting the financial statement and the cash flow quadrant diagrams together, you may get a clearer picture about your choices for financial IQ number 1, making more money. What this diagram explains is that E's and S's work for money. They work for a steady paycheck, for a commission, or by the hour. B's and I's work for assets that produce either cash flow or capital appreciation. One of the reasons I make more money than my classmates who sailed ships or flew planes is because they worked for paychecks. I on the other hand wanted to build assets as an entrepreneur and acquire assets as an investor. In other words, E's and S's focus on the income column of the financial statement, and B's and I's focus on the asset column. One of the hardest things to get across to an E or an S is that a B or I doesn't work for money. A B or I technically works for free, which is a tough concept for many to grasp. E's and S's work to be paid, and they must be paid before they work. Working for free, possibly for years, is not in their emotional or professional makeup. E's and S's may volunteer for charities, or work pro bono for worthy causes, but when it comes to personal income, they work for money. As a general rule, they do not work to build or acquire assets. In accounting terms, an E or S works for earned income, and a B or I works for passive or portfolio income. In the next chapter on financial IQ number 2, protecting your money, you will find out why the kind of income a person works for makes a big financial difference. Earned income is the hardest income to protect from financial predators. That is why working for earned income is not the financially smartest thing to do. Many self-employed people do not own a business. They own a job. If self-employed people stop working, their income also stops or declines. By definition, a job is not an asset. Assets put money in your pocket whether you work or not. If you would like to know more about the differences between the E, S, B, and I quadrants, I encourage you to read my second book in the Rich Dad series, Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant. Why the rich get richer. Looking at the diagram below, it is easy to understand why the rich get richer. One of the reasons the poor and middle class struggle is that they work for money and a steady paycheck. The problem with working for money is you have to work harder, longer, or charge more to make more money. The problem with physically working harder and longer is that we all have a finite amount of time and energy. One of the reasons why the rich get richer is that every year they work to build or acquire more assets. Adding more assets does not require working harder or longer. In fact, the higher a person's financial IQ, the less he or she works while acquiring more and better quality assets. You see, assets work for the rich by producing passive income. Every year, Kim and I set goals as to how many new assets we want. We do not set goals to make more money. When Kim first started investing in real estate, in 1989, she had a goal of 20 residential properties in 10 years. At the time, it seemed like a major task. She started with a 12-bedroom, 1-bath house in Portland, Oregon. 18 months, not 10 years, later she blew past her goal of 20 properties. After she reached her goal, she sold the units, taking capital gains of over $1 million, and upgraded for bigger and better units in Phoenix, Arizona, tax-free. In 2007, her personal goal is to add an additional 500 rental units to her portfolio. She already has over 1,000 units paying her passive income, the least taxed income, every month. She makes more money than most men, and she has accomplished all of this as an entrepreneur in the I quadrant. My focus is to increase my cash flow from business assets and commodities. I invest heavily in oil, gold, and silver companies. As an educational entrepreneur, each time I write a book I receive income for years in the form of royalties from approximately 50 publishers in different parts of the world. I'm also adding a franchise system of distribution to the business. I learned from my rock and roll business that it is better to be the licensor than to be the licensee. Although I love real estate, I enjoy entrepreneurship in the B quadrant a lot more. I do not write about this to brag. In fact, I hesitate to disclose our wealth and how we made it. There are people who resent those who make a lot of money. As you will find out in the next chapter on financial predators, it's dangerous to let people know you are rich. One big reason why I risk disclosing what we do and make is because Kim and I are committed to your financial education and increasing your financial IQ. A massive problem with financial education is that most of the people selling or sharing financial education come from the E and S quadrants. They are employees or self-employed people. Most are not really rich. Many are journalists who write about money but have little money themselves. Or they are salespeople such as stock and real estate brokers. Many of these financial experts have what other E's and S's have. They have retirement plans filled with stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Many are counting on the stock market for financial survival and will be wiped out if there is a massive market crash during their retirement. Many will struggle if the US dollar continues to decline in purchasing power and inflation takes off. In short, many financial experts handing out financial advice do not know if their retirement plans will work. If they did, many would have retired. Kim and I know our retirement plan works. We know because passive income pours in every month from our assets. We are not putting money in savings, bonds, or mutual funds for the future. If we are wiped out, which is always possible, our real asset will be our financial IQ. We can rebuild again because we focused more on learning rather than earning. We learned to manage our own money, rather than turn our money over to an E or S. As Rich Dad said, just because you invest or are self-employed, does not mean you are an investor or a business owner. In summary, the secret to making more money is found in the following diagram. In order to grow wealthy, you must come to terms with the fact that problems will never go away. Each time you find a solution to a problem, a new one will pop up. The key is to realize that the process of solving those problems makes you rich. And once you start solving not only your own problems, but others as well, then the sky is the limit. People will pay money for you to solve their problems. For example, I will pay money to my doctor to keep me healthy. I pay money to my housekeeper to keep my house tidy. I shop at my local supermarket, because my problem is hunger and starvation if I don't eat. I pay the person who runs a local restaurant for providing great food and a great dining experience. I pay taxes to public servants to provide a well-run government. I put money in the offering plate at church to support my spiritual guidance and education. Kim makes a lot of money because she solves a big problem, the problem of quality housing at an affordable price. The more she works to solve that problem, the more money she makes. I work hard to solve the problem of the need for financial education. Simply put, there are trillions of ways to make more money because there are trillions of, if not infinite, problems to solve. The question is, which problems do you want to solve? The more problems you solve, the richer you will become. Many people want to get paid for doing nothing, and are unwilling to solve any problems. Or they want to be paid more than the problem they are solving is worth. One of the reasons I did not join a union shipping company is because I am a capitalist, not a laborer. In fact, one of the reasons there are fewer U.S. ships today is because it costs too much money to operate a U.S. merchant ship. And that is one reason why most cargo and passenger ships in U.S. ports are not manned with U.S. citizens. The high cost of operating a U.S. ship is why so many graduates of my school, Kings Point, cannot find jobs when they graduate today. This is the problem of wanting to be paid more and doing less. My poor dad was a union man. In fact, he was the head of the Teachers Union of Hawaii. I understand his point of view that teachers had more power as a collective group. Without a union, teachers would be paid even less and have fewer benefits. Without a teachers' union, education would suffer more than it suffers today. My rich dad was a capitalist. Capitalists believe in producing a better product for a better price. If you cannot deliver a better product at a better price to more people, then the market will punish you. In other words, a capitalist gets paid to solve problems, not create problems, unless you make puzzles. Many think of capitalists as pigs. And many are greedy pigs. Yet there are capitalists who do a lot of good, such as provide healthcare, food, transportation, energy, and communications to the world. As a capitalist who does my best to make the world a better place, my problem is with people who want to be paid for doing nothing or paid more to do less. In my opinion, a person who wants to be paid more and do less, or nothing, is also a greedy pig. Those who want to be paid more for doing less will find life harder as the world changes. For example, labor unions that demand higher wages and benefits for less work are the major reason why jobs move overseas. Today in America, a unionized auto worker is paid about $75 an hour, including benefits. In China, the same auto worker is paid about 75 cents an hour. As I write, Chrysler has signed a deal with China's Chery Motors to produce cars there. Price: less than $2,500 a car. That is about the same price as health insurance costs add to every American car. A true capitalist is simply someone who recognizes a problem and creates a product or service to address that problem. You can charge a higher price if your product or service has a higher perceived value, but there needs to be added value. For example, I charge more money for my books and games because to some people there is more perceived educational value in them. For many other people, my books and games are not worth the price. Many do not value my brand of financial education because my brand of financial education does not solve their financial problem. Many people do not believe the rules of money changed in 1971 and 1974, and want to believe that they can keep working hard, saving money, investing in mutual funds, and expecting more pay for less work. For their sake and their family's financial future, I hope those beliefs and actions solve their financial problems. For your sake, I hope you do not believe that. I have a hunch that you don't, since you are reading this book and actively increasing your financial intelligence by doing so. Begin now to think about what problems you need to solve, engage those problems head-on, and the money will follow. And once you have that money, you're going to need to use every ounce of your financial intelligence to protect it. That's what the next chapter is all about. Financial IQ number 2, protecting your money.